Breaking news, FBI and DHS raid Michigan Port Director's office to 3.8 tons of drugs and millions seized. Now let's get into the details.
Eliminate and eradicate entire drug trafficking networks. We're going to clean out whole neighborhoods, and we're going to return.
And this takedown is exactly how you safeguard American lives. You go after the organization.
The morning mist rolled off Lake Michigan like it had for centuries, covering the quiet harbor in a blanket of peace. Fishing boats bobbed gently at their moorings. The lighthouse beams swept across calm waters. Children rode their bikes along the pier, their laughter mixing with the sound of seagulls. This was small-town America at its finest. A place where the biggest crime was usually a stolen bicycle or teenagers drinking beer behind the marina. But beneath this postcard-perfect surface, something dark was growing. Something that would shatter the illusion and reveal how deeply corruption can burrow into the heart of our communities. At 6:15 in the morning, federal agents surrounded the Harbor Administration building. Black SUVs rolled to a stop outside the modest brick structure that had overseen peaceful maritime operations for decades. Inside that building, behind a desk marked with a simple nameplate reading Director, sat someone who had spent 4 years quietly dismantling everything this community believed about safety and trust.
Agents have exposed a major cartel breach inside Michigan's largest airport, Kingid, led by the airport director herself.
The woman who arrived each morning with coffee and a friendly smile had engineered one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations the Great Lakes had ever seen. Her name was Dana Whitford. To her neighbors, she was the efficient port director who kept the boats running on schedule. To her co-workers, she was the reliable administrator who always had the right answer. To federal investigators, she was the architect of a billion-dollar narcotics pipeline that had poisoned an entire region. When the truth finally surfaced, it would expose not just a single corrupt official, but an entire network that reached from Mexican cartels to tribal casinos, from quiet lakeside cabins to the highest levels of local law enforcement. The Sinaloa cartel had been searching for exactly what Dana could provide. The southern border was saturated with surveillance. Coastal ports bristled with scanners and federal oversight. Every traditional smuggling route was under constant watch. But the Great Lakes represented something different entirely. Here was an unguarded highway system stretching deep into the American heartland. Thousands of miles of shoreline with minimal patrol coverage. Small ports with skeleton crews and outdated security protocols. It was the perfect backdoor into the most lucrative drug markets in the country. Dana understood this opportunity better than anyone. She had studied every inspection procedure, memorized every Coast Guard patrol pattern, and identified every weakness in the system. Her transformation of the port didn't happen overnight. It was a masterpiece of patience and precision that unfolded over years. She began with microscopic changes that appeared to be efficiency improvements, scheduling adjustments that created gaps in coverage, streamlined clearance protocols for trusted commercial partners, emergency mooring zones for vessels caught in bad weather. Each modification seemed harmless in isolation, but together they formed a sophisticated smuggling infrastructure. The expedited clearance system she implemented was particularly brilliant. Legitimate commercial traffic that normally required hours of inspection could now clear the port in under 7 minutes. The paperwork labeled these as trusted vessels from established shipping companies. The reality was far different. These were cartel boats carrying multi-ton loads of narcotics directly into the American interior. No questions asked, no inspections required, no paper trail that could be traced back to suspicious activity. While Dana was reshaping the physical infrastructure, she was simultaneously building something even more dangerous. A financial architecture that could clean hundreds of millions in drug money and make it disappear into the legitimate economy. The centerpiece of this operation was a network of tribal casinos within driving distance of the harbor. These establishments became sophisticated money laundering machines that processed cartel revenue on an industrial scale. The technique was elegant in its simplicity. Couriers would arrive at the casinos with duffel bags full of cash from drug sales. They would purchase high-value chips using fake identities, play a few hands of cards or spin the roulette wheel once, then cash out immediately. On paper, dirty money from narcotics trafficking had been transformed into legitimate gambling winnings. Casino managers on Dana's payroll ensured that large transactions went through without scrutiny or documentation. Night after night, millions of dollars were washed clean and fed back into the financial system. The human cost of this operation was staggering. Overdose rates across northern Michigan exploded by over 300% in 3 years. Rural counties that had never dealt with hard drug problems suddenly had death rates exceeding major urban centers. Emergency medical teams found themselves responding to overdose calls in places they had never associated with narcotics. Boat ramps at 3 in the morning, fishing docks at sunset, gas station bathrooms that had never needed overdose reversal medication in their entire history. The drugs weren't staying locked in warehouses. They were spreading through 27 small communities like a virus. Local distributors emerged from unexpected places. High school students who had started with prescription pills and escalated to dealing. Opportunistic criminals who realized they could undercut prices anywhere in the state and still turn massive profits. People fresh out of rehab or prison who were recruited as expendable runners and cash couriers. The network grew organically, feeding off the massive supply flowing through Dana's port. 7 high schools reported sudden clusters of drug incidents that didn't match anything in their historical data. Teachers began finding synthetic chemical residue in hallway lockers. Parents watched their children disappear into addiction before they even understood what substances had invaded their community. Some families lost children before they realized the scope of the threat they were facing. Federal agencies had been tracking anomalies for months before they understood the full scope of the operation. Financial analysts at the Treasury Department flagged unusual cash flows through the casino networks. Customs officials noticed vessel clearances that didn't align with standard risk assessment protocols. Public health data revealed overdose patterns that overlaid perfectly with shipping manifests from the port. Slowly, investigators began connecting dots that revealed a conspiracy far larger than anyone had imagined. The breakthrough came when agents intercepted a shipping container marked for expedited clearance through Dana's fast-track system. The manifest listed routine commercial cargo. Inside the container, they found 200 kilograms of fentanyl, 500 kilograms of methamphetamine, and 62 kilograms of heroin. Hidden alongside the narcotics were industrial-grade GPS jamming devices capable of making vessels disappear from tracking systems at critical moments. Every crate bore the distinctive markings of the Sinaloa cartel's northern distribution network. That discovery triggered the largest coordinated law enforcement operation in Great Lakes history. At 2:30 in the morning, while northern Michigan slept peacefully, 620 federal agents from the FBI, DEA, and Department of Homeland Security began moving toward 41 predetermined targets. The operation they called Northern Breakwater was designed to dismantle the entire network in a single coordinated strike. Breaching teams hit distribution warehouses that had masqueraded as legitimate storage facilities. Coast Guard helicopters swept across the bay with searchlights, hunting for vessels trying to escape under cover of darkness. Roadblocks materialized on highway corridors as cartel vehicles loaded with product and cash ran directly into spike strips and armed federal agents. At several locations, defenders opened fire, leading to extended gun battles through maze-like warehouse complexes. The scope of what investigators uncovered defied belief. Dana had transformed a sleepy harbor into a fully operational cartel gateway complete with secured intake, sophisticated money laundering, and regional distribution networks. The random crimes that had plagued the area, the overdoses in fishing towns, the violence at roadside motels. None of it had been disconnected incidents. They were all symptoms of a single machine that had been quietly poisoning an entire region. When agents stormed Dana's office at the Port Administration Building, they found evidence that painted a picture of calculated betrayal. Cash totaling $2.3 million was packed into waterproof roller suitcases ready for a quick escape. 14 restricted access cards belonged to individuals who didn't appear on any official staffing records. A loaded 9mm pistol sat within arm's reach of her desk chair. Most disturbing were the documents labeled as fuel pipeline planning that, upon closer examination, revealed detailed maps of offload and refuel points along the Great Lakes shipping routes. The investigation revealed that Dana hadn't built this empire alone. She had assembled a supporting cast of corrupted officials who had slowly compromised the integrity of multiple institutions. 4 casino managers had quietly bent protocols, approving massive chip transactions and privacy accommodations that should have triggered immediate red flags. 3 Coast Guard officers had accepted $12,000 per month each to ensure smooth sailing for cartel vessels, which translated to selective blindness during critical transits and a willingness to ignore obvious anomalies in shipping patterns. 2 property developers had leased clusters of lakeside cabins and storage units that served as regional distribution hubs, creating a network of safe houses that appeared to be legitimate vacation rentals. None of these individuals believed they were constructing a cartel stronghold on American soil. They were simply taking envelopes, signing leases, and looking the other way when unusual activity occurred on their properties. The financial investigation revealed the true sophistication of the operation. Federal forensic accountants traced $163.4 million that had been laundered through the casino route alone, and investigators emphasized that this figure represented only what they could definitively prove. The money had flowed through a complex three-tier system that moved cartel revenue from street sales to offshore accounts with remarkable efficiency. Casino cash was first converted into domestic bank accounts in Arizona and Wisconsin, territories that had long been familiar to cartel financial couriers. From there, the funds jumped into cryptocurrency platforms and remittance channels disguised as legitimate business transactions or consulting payments. The digital assets were then transferred to Mexico and reassembled in offshore accounts beyond the easy reach of American law enforcement. The third tier closed the loop by wiring money back to Dana's network of 37 shell companies, with deliberately bland names like Great Lakes Marine Advisors, Harbor Efficiency Group, and North Shore Development Services. Each invoice she submitted corresponded precisely with the arrival of specific vessels. To any auditor reviewing the books, it appeared to be routine consultancy work related to port optimization. In reality, every line item represented successful narcotics shipments that had moved through American communities. As dawn broke over Lake Michigan, the scale of Operation Northern Breakwater became clear. More than 5,000 suspects were in federal custody across 21 major cities. The raids had stretched from Chicago's logistics corridors to distribution networks in Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and throughout the East Coast. This represented the largest federal strike against organized drug trafficking in modern American history. The seized evidence painted a portrait of industrial-scale poisoning. Agents had confiscated over $200 million worth of fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and weapons. They had dismantled dozens of command nodes and severed multiple cartel supply lines that had been operating with impunity for years. The operation proved that Mexican cartels had evolved far beyond simple criminal organizations into sophisticated multinational corporations with supply chains, accountants, chemists, logistics managers, and armed enforcement units. But the victory came with sobering revelations about the depth of institutional corruption. The list of compromised professionals continued to grow as federal prosecutors filed indictments. Port clerks who had seemed harmless turned out to be crucial gatekeepers trained to misfile inspection alerts for specific vessels. Coast Guard members admitted they had known exactly what they were facilitating when they accepted monthly payments. Casino supervisors confessed they had understood that their high-rolling night customers weren't legitimate gamblers. The human cost extended far beyond the immediate arrests. Emergency medical services across northern Michigan had been overwhelmed by overdose calls in locations that had never required such responses. Morgues in rural counties had run out of space as death rates climbed to levels that exceeded major urban centers. High schools had begun storing overdose reversal medication alongside fire extinguishers, as synthetic chemicals flooded through student populations. Parents described watching their children disappear into addiction before anyone understood what substances had invaded their communities. Teachers reported finding drug paraphernalia in school hallways that they couldn't even identify. Local law enforcement agencies had been stretched beyond their capabilities, facing longer response times and criminal activity they weren't equipped to handle. Dana Whitford was located 7 hours after the first raids began, hiding in a rented cabin near Torch Lake. There was no dramatic confrontation or final shootout. She walked out quietly with her hands raised, appearing more exhausted than defiant. Agents on scene reported that she seemed almost relieved that her double life had finally ended. The investigation revealed that the Sinaloa cartel had used one port director to establish a completely new trafficking artery through the Great Lakes region. This network had tens of thousands of operatives and supply lines reaching into all 50 states, demonstrating how a single point of corruption could compromise entire regions. The cartels had learned to exploit American infrastructure by infiltrating positions of trust, rather than relying solely on traditional border smuggling routes. Federal agencies recognized that this case represented a fundamental shift in how drug trafficking organizations operate on American soil. The cartels had stopped thinking like street gangs and started functioning like multinational corporations. They had learned to buy influence rather than fight for territory. They had discovered that corruption could be more effective than violence in achieving their strategic objectives. The lesson resonated throughout law enforcement communities across the nation. Between 1999 and 2022, the United States had lost over 700,000 people to opioid overdoses. These deaths didn't appear randomly. They traveled along infrastructure networks, shipping lanes, ports, trucking corridors, and rail lines. And they depended critically on people in positions of authority who could transform legitimate pathways into arteries for poison. Northern Michigan would survive, but the scars would remain visible for years. The harbor still operates today, Boats still dock there, and tourists eventually return to buy ice cream on the boardwalk. But the community had learned a harsh lesson about how corruption infiltrates small-town America and how quickly trust can be weaponized against the people it's supposed to protect. The collapse of Dana Whitford's empire serves as a stark reminder that the war against narcotics trafficking is not just fought at distant borders or in major cities. It's waged in the heart of small-town America, where corruption can take root behind friendly smiles and government badges. The Great Lakes operation proved that cartels no longer need to muscle their way across barbed wire fences in the desert. They can simply buy their way through legitimate institutions, one signature at a time. Operation Northern Breakwater demonstrated what becomes possible when federal agencies coordinate their resources and refuse to accept the status quo. The FBI, DEA, and Department of Homeland Security proved that even the most sophisticated criminal networks can be dismantled when investigators follow the money, track the patterns, and act with decisive force. But the victory also revealed a troubling truth about how deeply corruption had penetrated institutions that communities trusted without question. The question that haunts investigators today is simple, but terrifying. How many other Dana Whitfords are sitting at desks across America right now, quietly reshaping the infrastructure around them? How many harbors, airports, and border crossings have someone in authority who believes nobody will ever notice the small changes they make? If it happened once on Lake Michigan, it can happen again anywhere that vigilance falters and trust becomes a weapon. The fight for America's communities continues, and it demands citizens who refuse to look away when something doesn't seem right. Because the next battleground might not be in a distant desert or a major metropolitan area. It might be in your hometown, behind a door marked Director, where evil wears a government badge and corruption masquerades as efficiency. The only defense is eternal vigilance and the courage to ask hard questions when the answers matter most.